That was really weak.
Yeah, it's because you did the can or the bottle instead of the can. You don't quite get the resonance from the glass bottle that you do from the aluminum cans. But hey, sometimes you got to work with what you got.
It's true. So. But beer tastes better from a bottle, so cheers.
Well, to each their own, I say. I would technically say it tastes better from the draft, but that's not really an option right now. So
that's probably
anyway, we're getting in here, Mike and I. Well, I'm going to start calling you Fantini. I'm going to get in the habit in that, and I'll explain that in just a second.
Okay.
But teaching band camp, high school band, grueling, getting in the March of the season. But we're back, recording another episode. Finally, took a little hiatus, but yeah, we're in it.
Yep. Today we're back with another guest. We haven't. I think the last 3 episodes have just been you and I talking about the end of the DCI season. So this will be a kind of change of pace from what all the listeners are used to. So it should be a good one. The guest today we're pretty excited about.
Yeah, I think it's a good change of pace because some people are like, "Hey, are you guys gonna have a guest again?"
Yeah.
I don't appreciate people listening to you and I, but it definitely makes it more interesting when we get a third-party perspective or somebody that maybe disagrees with us or just has some outside vantage view that we don't get.
For sure. So why are you going to start calling me by my last name?
Well, I'm going to call you, or at least try to call you Fantini.
I just figured it out.
Try to call you Fantini this episode because we are joined by another guest who is another Mike Leitzke. Welcome, Mike.
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
And we're going to let Mike introduce himself here in a second. But first, welcome everyone to the Aged Out Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Fantini, and with me, as always, is
Evan Worrell.
And make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube, like the video, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, subscribe on Spotify and iTunes, and as always, tell your friends. All that stuff helps us grow and see where we can take this whole podcast endeavor we're on. So I'll let Evan take it from here, and we'll just get into it.
Yeah, so to try to cut down on confusion, I'll try to address Fantini and then Mike so that we all kind of know who we're talking to, at least from my perspective. But like we said, welcome, Mike. Mike has some similar background as far as groups to myself and also another alumni of Rhythm X, but also has a little bit different avenue that he's gone and also in the percussive game, especially marching, in a different perspective than I think anybody that we've had on at this point. So thanks again for joining us, Mike. Kind of take us through real quick your beginnings of your percussive career, getting in the band, how it all started, and we'll do a snapshot up to kind of where you are today.
For sure. Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me on this. This is super cool to be a part of my first podcast ever. So pretty
nice.
Sweet. So I guess throwing it way back now, because I'm a little bit older, I suppose. I come from a pretty musical family. My uncle is a session drummer in Houston and has been his entire career. He went to UNT back when it was called North Texas State. And my mom was a drummer. She was the center snare in my high school drum line that I ended up going to. My uncle was the center snare in the high school drum line. I was not the center snare in the high school drum line, but I played in the snare line for a little bit and then moved on to the front ensemble. So I was really fortunate to grow up in where I did in the Chicago suburbs and went to Prospect High School. Brett Kuhn of Cavaliers, Bluecoats, and Imachi fame taught me how to hold sticks when I was in 4th grade and taught me until I graduated high school. So I was super fortunate to grow up in that area and be taught by him and a bunch of other great folks like Dave Schmuck and Joe Roach and other guys that are, still involved in the activity, at least tangentially. So great environment to grow up in. From there, I went to the University of South Carolina for my undergraduate degree in a little bit of a different discipline than maybe what most might expect. I have an undergraduate degree in atmospheric science and learned a lot of math and took 4 semesters of calculus instead of taking a bunch of music theory and all of that. But, it was a great choice for me to do and really enjoyed going to school at the University of South Carolina. Played on the drum line there for 1 year with a bunch of drum corps pit people. We played on this section called the Ride Line, kind of based off of what they did at Michigan State. So It's a interesting little setup in there, but a fun thing to do for college drumline for a season, and see what that whole thing was all about. I marched drum corps for 3 years with Carolina Crown from 2006 to 2008. I was in the front ensemble all 3 years. So
the People's Front Ensemble.
That's right. It was the beginning of the People's Front Ensemble in that 2008 year. It was a electric group to be a part of, as we like to say.
Is that really Crown's Pit's nickname?
Yeah, now it is.
Yeah,
well, I don't know who coined that. Mike Bishop or something?
So it started with the '08 group. We would do this little pre-show hype, just pit circle like most groups do. And as a kid that grew up in the late '90s, I was a big fan of the WWF and The Rock, and we would just kind of like get into these characters and kind of rib back and forth. And we just started doing these pre-show hype speeches as if we were The Rock, and it all started to be the People's Front Ensemble, and we were going to be the most electrifying front ensemble in drum corps international entertainment.
That's awesome.
So it started out that year, and it's pretty cool to see that. I think they're still calling themselves that, but I really don't know for sure. But it was a pretty collaborative effort to kind of craft that whole thing. But it was a ton of fun, especially towards the end of the season.
That's awesome. So taking a little bit of a step back to what you just said, taught by Brett Kuhn in high school. When you were there, did you realize like, oh, this is Brett Kuhn? Or like, when did it kind of, you make the connection like, oh, this guy's maybe more than the average high school instructor? I feel that way too when people talk about like Tom Ox being at Dartmouth and like teaching kids in like middle school. I'm like, they don't even know like who he is, like to us now in retrospect.
Oh, yeah. I had absolutely no clue what I was working with at that point in time. I mean, we had every possible opportunity given to us from a playing standpoint and, from an equipment standpoint. He was with the Cavs at that point in time. So, when we went to go get cymbals, we would just drive on over to the Cavaliers garage in Rosemont, 15 minutes away, and go through 20 cymbal bags of brand new Zildjian cymbals and all of that. And, not until a little bit later when I started teaching myself and realizing, hey, it's not really like this everywhere. But I realized we had a little something special. Exactly.
Yeah, I marched with a kid in 2010 at Blue Stars who was a Tom Ongst kid. And none of the rest of us went to a high school like that. But Dartmouth was all he knew. He was 16, and he was like, wait, there were times he would just make comments like, oh, that's not how it is everywhere. Like he just wasn't aware how lucky he was.
Yeah, it is 100% like that. I mean, Cavaliers would do early percussion move-ins at the school. So I remember like rolling up to the school, my mom dropping me off before my freshman year. And that was the 2001 summer. So to just see these like 9 dudes out there with the snares with the hi-hats on them, just chopping out in this place. So this little zone we called the helicopter pad. Like 14-year-old me was like mind blown. Like it was such a cool first experience.
Is it the Niagara show? Is that right?
Four Corners.
Four Corners. Oh, doesn't matter. Anytime you like talk about Cavaliers from the year 2000 to like 2004, it was a great show.
Oh yeah.
Niagara, Four Corners, Spin Cycle. Then it was Machine. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Machine was 06.
Oh yeah.
What was 2004? I don't know.
James Bond.
007.
Oh yeah.
Andrew Markworth was in there. Anyway, so I went to USC, did the drumline. Oh, speaking of USC, this was going to mention earlier. How do you feel that the old South Carolina football took the L to the in-state UNC?
Let me just say that I'm very glad that I have engagements for every Saturday from here to the end of the season, so I'm not going to have to worry about watching one more second of Will Muschamp's terrible football.
Oh my gosh, that was brutal.
I feel for you. University of Louisville.
Oh yeah, Louisville.
2-10 last season.
Well, hey, I think we're going to be on track for that because we played Georgia, Alabama, and Clemson. So that's not a good thing for the Gamecocks. But
this is like the Twilight Zone because somehow in the conversation between Mike at USC, Fantini, a U of L fan, and me being here in Lexington, where Kentucky is somehow the best football program of these three. So I'm not real sure what's going on, but
hey, listen, this is going to make me sound really bad, but the Gamecocks haven't been able to beat the Wildcats in 5 years.
Whew.
They have had our number, man. I tell you what. I don't know what it is about him. I mean, Spurrier's last year, I think it was, or he might have already been gone at that point, and the interim coach was in there, but they lost, and then Muschamp hasn't been able to beat the Wildcats.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I'll take it. That's all I say. I'm not going to jinx it. I'll take it.
All right. Last thing I'll say.
We've got your guys' number in basketball a couple times throughout the last few years, though. So
yeah.
I'll take that.
Was it Frank Martin? Dude, I love Frank Martin. He's just like he's tenacity personified, man. He's just like all energy all the time. I love it.
South Carolina has the angriest coaches in college sports.
That's true. That is a true statement. All right. Before we get too more sidetracked, let's rewind a little bit. Last thing I'll say about this stuff is I don't think UK's football team is going to be as good as people think they are this year. But moving on. So
just a minor little swipe there.
We'll see.
I'm required to say it. So back to band-related stuff. So we've gone through your drum corps history, how you got in and started, Brett Kuhn, the Carolina Crown. How'd you get into judging? How'd that start?
Well, I guess we can take it back to indoor then. So I marched Rhythm X in the 2008 year, which was a pretty sweet year to be a part of that group. For
one of the best WGI shows of all time.
Agreed.
One of the cleanest batteries I think I've ever heard in my entire life. My goodness, they were incredible. And it was awesome to be a part of that. But my experience there, I finished up with that group. And then in the lot right before finals, a guy that I had known from the Carolina area had come in, and he had asked me if I was interested in writing and teaching for a group called Palmetto Percussion. That was kind of a startup group. And they had done, I think, maybe 2 years to that point. But I came in for the 2009 season and wrote the front book and taught the front for the next 3 years. And we were fortunate enough to almost medal in 2009 in Independent Open. We had a pretty rough finals run with some electronic snafus, but, that happens.
I got a bronze medal in 2009 in WGI in Independent Open.
There you go. Is that Tate's Creek?
Tate's Creek, that was.
That's right, baby. Oh, yeah.
I got fourth place all 3 years I marched indoors. Just missed out on a medal.
Yeah. So we were fortunate to build upon that, and we won Independent Open the year after that with a show that just really worked well. It was a lot of fun to create. And then moved forward with 1 year for them in Independent World Class, and we were fortunate enough to make World Class Finals for the first time ever, which was really, really cool to see those kids that, for the most part, had been a part of the group since it started in 2009 or 2007 or 2008. And a lot of them aged out that 2011 year, and they got to go from being a part of this like startup ensemble to here at the big dance on Saturday night. So it was super cool to be a part of that. But from there, my career was taking me into some different directions, and I wasn't going to have the availability to, really dig in and write the book and do everything the way that I had. So I was approached by the local circuit in the area, CWE, or the Carolina Winter Ensembles Association, and they asked me if I was interested in judging. And I hadn't really thought about it to that point. I always respected the guys that we had in judging the group. We had, Matt Savage and a lot of the WGI guys at that time came in. So I had a lot of good model tapes to listen to, and I just thought I'd give it a shot. So did a little bit of training on the local circuit side, just really like a one afternoon seminar thing or clinic, and just kind of dove right in and started in the Carolinas doing local circuit stuff in the CWE circuit. And then at that time, there was another circuit in the upstate, like the Dorman area, Spartanburg, that zone called SEPA. And I started working there as well. And they got some of the more national judges in. And I was super fortunate that getting to know some of the guys that were judging those shows, they helped to mentor me as I was getting started and give me pointers like, me hitting them up on email, just being like, hey, here's these 5 tapes, listen to them and tell me what sucks. Tell me what I can do to get better. And, I got a lot of great input from people, and that really helped me to develop in those formative years of just learning how to speak into a recorder and form a coherent sentence, which is more challenging than you might think at times.
Oh, believe me, if you go back
No
and
doubt.
listen to our first few podcasts, I did that recently, and both Evan and I have gotten a lot better of talking into a microphone or a headset. I think so, at least.
And one benefit that you guys have is you get to go back and you can edit it.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But in all honesty, I don't have to do a whole lot of editing. Most of it is just like there'll be a pause and like an I just kind of cut that down. Typically, I don't have to cut a lot out, which is good. I used to cut a lot more out than I do now. Now we've gotten a lot better and more consistent, and yeah.
It's actually funny that you say that too. Before I did my first local circuit, I've done a few years judging locally here in the state of Kentucky, but I was so nervous about how I would be perceived on the tapes because I wanted to give good information and I wanted it to be coherent in like a complete thought instead of just like a run-on stream of conscious, like brain leap to brain leap, and I'm not even finishing one thought before I move on to the next, that I would sit down on my couch with my voice memo on my iPhone and watch shows on YouTube and just like critique them and comment on them and then go back and listen to it and be like, oh my gosh, this sounds terrible, or this sounds terrible, or I didn't finish this thought, to try to like prepare myself for just that first judging experience. And I'd like to think that I've gotten better since then over the couple of years that I've done, just by reaching out to groups that I've judged and be like, hey, I know I sent you the tape. Like, what you guys think? Do you want any more feedback? This, that. But yeah, it's kind of nerve wracking.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. But like that technique that you're talking about is perfect. Like that's exactly what I was doing, and just going onto YouTube and just searching like indoor drumline show and just like taking whatever I could find and just trying to like learn how to react in the moment and how to phrase commentary, and just trying to like envision you being in the seat and all that stuff, just getting those reps. That really helped me out, especially early on.
And it's definitely too a whole nother scenario when you're watching a show as a spectator where you're just really soaking it in versus, and I'm sure we'll get into this in a little bit more detail here in a minute, but just like the narrow scope of this caption that you're trying to stick to. And there were times when I was judging local circuits where I was like, oh, that group had a color guard, didn't even notice. Whatever.
Oh, dude, I'm real bad about that.
Yeah, I mean that's what you do when you're doing an analysis caption like that. It's always fun, like after doing an indoor drumline show, and you're talking in critique or right before critique with the other guys in the panel, and they're talking about, oh yeah, this show where they had this red floor and all of this happened and this big moment in the show, and it's like, yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about. But I know the group that played the cheese pachatas off the left while doing a demi plie.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh man.
So you went through a few local circuits there.
Did that just kind of spread my wings a little bit. Was fortunate that some circuits over on the East Coast especially took a chance on someone who's relatively unknown to come in and give their thoughts about the circuits groups, and I guess I kept doing a good enough job that they would ask me to come back, and it just kind of spreads like that. The more people that you judge with, you grow your network, and then get more opportunities from there. So I did that for I think 4 or 5 years, and I was at WGI. I think it was in 2014 at championships, and I got approached by someone who's a former director of a group, and they asked me if I was ever interested in judging for DCI. And admittedly, that had always been like something that was like a long-term goal. I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that. Like, that'd be super cool, but like I probably need a lot more years to go. Like at that point, I think I was like 26 or 27 years old, so like pretty young. And that person had heard a bunch of my tapes from somewhere, and I don't know where, and ended up submitting them on my behalf to the DCI judge training and leadership folks. And he basically said, hey, they're going to give you a call, and if you want to trial this summer, go ahead and do it. So I thought,
dude, that's wild. That sounds like something that you see on like one of those like X Factor or something, like, oh, my brother signed me up for this. And now I'm here because they signed me up, and I don't want to let them down. It's like, oh, somebody else submitted your tapes on your behalf. It's like, well, now I guess I got to go.
Well, it's crazy because, I mean, at that time, I didn't know John Phillips. I didn't know Lee Carlson. I didn't know all of those guys. Glenn Fugit was the judge liaison for percussion at the time. Like, I didn't know those guys at all. So, I mean, if I didn't have, this person giving me kind of a bump, who knows? I may not have had that opportunity ever. So, it's something that I'm kind of forever thankful for. And, it's worked out really, really well for me. I've been super fortunate. So I got the call and went in and did my trial judging that season. I think I did the Lisle, Illinois Cavaliers home show right after the 4th of July. And then I trialed at the Atlanta Regional. And the Atlanta Regional was like my first real taste of like, this is what a big show feels like. This is a long, long day. And it's just like getting that stamina up to stay engaged and be able to react accordingly for, 14 plus hours. That was a real test to where I felt like I got through it and I was like, okay, I feel like I might be able to do this.
Was that the summer of 2014 you were doing the trial?
Yes. Yeah, that was summer of 2014.
Yeah, that seems, I'm sure from that perspective and just like being able to keep your brain moving and just keep the momentum going is a huge key. Because from a fan perspective, even for me at this point, sitting and watching shows and just like watching them, like watching 6-7 drum corps in a row even is like, wow, this is a lot of time. You have the breaks in between, but obviously there's more things going on for you guys, I'm sure, in between shows, submitting numbers, submitting sheets, submitting this, finishing recordings, like, okay, making sure you're getting everything submitted before you can move on to the next group and that sort of stuff. So there's a lot more mechanics involved.
Oh yeah, it's pretty much nonstop from, the national anthem until critique is done. It does not really stop. So you get a little, if there's an intermission at the show, you get a little bit of a chance to catch your breath then. But, especially if you're down on the field and you've got to go get food or something, usually you got to go upstairs and all that. So, even then, it's not a super long break to just kind of chill out. But, I'm one of those people that's like, when I get engaged in something and it's like, it's go time, we're focused. Like I'm in there, I'm ready to go.
Yeah. The idea of how taxing it probably is to judge a full DCI show never really occurred to me until I judged the show myself the first time. I only judged 6 bands in prelims and 6 bands in finals. And even that, I was like, man, I'm pretty tired. I thought about it, I was like, man, these drum corps judges will judge like 15 shows in a row at some time. It's nuts.
Yeah. I mean, doing prelims in 2017, I think we had like 52 or something like that total.
And it was the same panel?
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But on the flip side of that, though, too, like I'm sitting here thinking of the perspective of you guys being like on the field, like feeling that raw energy from those performers that just like gets you juiced up each show to like, all right, these kids are coming at me with everything they got. Like, I got to give it back to them. Like, let's go. And then at the end of it, when the dust settles, you just feel like you came out of like a time warp where you just did a 14-hour day and you're like, man, that just happened. I blacked out. What happened? Like the Will Ferrell in Old School. He's like, I blacked out. What happened?
Your adrenaline wears off and you realize how tired you actually are.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are right on the money with it. Like even this year coming off the field at prelims, like, I finished up with, I don't even remember who was on last, but, I felt really good about everything. Like my voice was holding up. And then we got back to the hotel and someone went to just say something to me or like ask how it went. And I didn't have any more words. My words were gone.
Reached your word quota for the day.
Yes, most definitely.
Well, kind of getting into the trial judging. So you trial judged in 2014. You said somebody submitted your tapes. What was, I guess, the process for you to get through the trial judging and then learning, I guess, the system, the sheets, the terminology? Like, was there training, like that sort of background?
Yeah, so it's a little bit different now than it was back then. But back then, basically, you had to have some people basically, kind of endorse you to go through the trial process and either submit letters of recommendation or submit your tapes on your behalf. You tried to have some credentials beforehand. And then you'd go through the annual training that they do with the judges every single year. Usually, I think it's in the beginning of June, maybe late May, early June. And then, it's really until you have your first trial assignment. So you have plenty of time to study the sheets, and you have plenty of time to, just kind of familiarize yourself with the criteria and practice as much as you possibly can. Because like both of you have said now, the first time you walk into a DCI show and you've got your trial judge badge on, you're gonna feel like $1,000,000, but on the inside, man, you're gonna be shaking like a leaf. I was so nervous. And really still do get nervous for every single show that I do, just because I want to do the best that I possibly can. But so you'll go through, you'll do the first show for me was that it was a smaller show in the Chicago suburbs, and that was the only one that I did where there was like a critique. So you got to participate in critique as really just an observer and just kind of check out what's going on. Jeff Osdemore was the working judge that night, so Jeff's a pretty excellent judge, so it was cool to see him kind of work in critique and, kind of manage the groups coming in and how to handle, sometimes when things can get a little bit more heated or, because everyone's going to come in there, they're advocating for their group.
Yeah. I was going to bring up and take this opportunity, since you brought up critique, to talk about critique a little bit.
Sure.
That's something I feel like a lot of people don't really or aren't really aware of from the outside. And so like you mentioned kind of laughingly that it can get kind of heated sometimes. I mean, to me, that would be very nerve-wracking as a judge. Like you just kind of made a call on the field and you put somebody above somebody that hasn't been happening recently. So like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You're sitting across the table from Scott Johnson, Tom Hannum, Tom
exactly.
Mike Jackson. I mean, the list goes on, like Paul Rennick.
All
these people who are like trying to vouch for their group.
Yeah. And everyone has their own particular style of sales, I suppose you could say.
Sales.
But, I try to approach it in the way where it's like, all right, you heard the tape, you heard the read, tell me what I missed. Because, a lot of groups want to talk about content and everything like that. So, if you're unhappy with, what's out there or what the number was or the ordinal was, whatever, help guide me. Tell me what I missed. Tell me what I need to check out for next time. And I think that helps to break down a little bit more of a situation that could be contentious. And it's just, my job is to be out there and I want to reward everything that those kids are doing. And if there's something that I missed, tell me, and I'll make sure that I see it next time.
And I think that that's the brilliance of critique, or at least where groups can make the most out of critique, whether it's DCI, BOA. I don't know if BOA does critique, your local circuit or whatever. I've been on the other end of a local circuit critique where people want to come in on a much less, I don't want to say legitimate scale, but maybe there's less at stakes. I mean, obviously there's the DCI is the highest level it can be. But when you're sitting there at a local circuit, it's like, oh, well, this. And I'm like, okay, well, help me understand so that I can help reward you the best that I can. So I get what you're saying from that perspective. After you leave a critique, would you say, I'm sure you're obviously taking notes on the things that are giving, that changes your geography on where you're trying to read a show the next time you see it?
Yeah, it certainly can do that. Another really good opportunity for critique is, for groups to talk about planned changes. They all know the schedule, so they know when they're going to see us next. And I'll just say, hey, I'm going to see you you know when you're going to see me next. So are you going to have a new closer, or is there going to be anything that I need to know about for next time? So that way I can do a little bit of preparation as well to make sure that I'm not caught off guard.
And that's the next thing I was going to ask. How much I always assumed, and I'm pretty sure it's this way, correct me if I'm wrong, that judges have to watch the shows or the groups they're going to judge ahead of time to
100%.
give you an idea. Okay, here's a percussion moment here. I need to be over on this yard line here. And do you kind of like give yourself a roadmap?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm one of the guys that's out there. I've got a clipboard with me that has, where I'm supposed to go for every show. And, before my first show with each group, I'll spend some time watching their production and mapping out where I can get safely, and making sure that I'm in the zones that I need to be in for those segments of the show.
Would you say that, I guess this will jump around a little bit, so obviously they had the rule change this year where they limited field judges to how far off the sideline or the amount of space that they're allowed to take off the sideline to view the vantage points of the shows. Would you say that that has in some ways enhanced what you're able to receive because you're not worried about other things like running into people, or how's it affected? Because obviously you've been before and now you're after the rule change.
Yeah, I think the rule change this year worked well because the groups changed their design. If the groups had used, 2018 and prior design where the battery spent a lot of the same amount of time back behind the back hash, I think it would have been a little bit more difficult from an exposure standpoint. But, all summer long, I didn't really feel like I got an inadequate read from anybody because everyone brought their batteries up front. The front ensembles had a lot of exposure time as well. And, I know that there were a lot of questions and everything about the system and how that all got implemented and what the outcome was going to be because of that. But, I really think it actually worked pretty well. I always felt comfortable out there for the shows. I know it's a little bit different for the visual and the brass guy just because they were not so used to kind of crossing paths with the percussion folks. But, I think it really worked out well for everyone. Got a lot of, I haven't done any sort of analysis on this. This is something I've been wanting to do, but like looking at how much total exposure time I got on the field this year at like, say, the Murfreesboro show versus the same group last year or the year before at the Murfreesboro show. Just taking a look at what that looks like.
Oh, I love the numbers. Mike loves, or Fantini loves the numbers too. And you obviously said you did a lot of math for your degree as well. But I just love breaking down the numbers and factoring in. And Mike and I have talked, and Fantini and I have talked just about like how maybe groups will design their shows in accordance with the rule change and that sort of analytics. And I think that stuff is very fascinating. It just, at the end of the day, it's just more feedback. It's more data. It's more stats that people will use to try to quote unquote design the perfect show. So,
yeah. And really the whole thing with the rule change is that maybe most people don't necessarily understand. And this may be a little bit behind the scenes information, but, when I saw information first come out about the possibility of this rule change, everyone was like, oh, DCI just wants to do this, DCI wants to do that. And it's the cores are really the ones that drive all decisions regarding anything involving the judges, whether it be the criteria that we evaluate, where our placement is on the field or in the stands, or really anything that we do is all driven from them. So, it'll go through the instructor caucus and then through the rule selection task force, and then it goes up through the directors who ultimately give it a yay or a nay. So, the cores are really the ones that voted on all of that and really made it happen.
I want to back up for a second. You mentioned a minute ago you felt like you got a better read of drum lines this year than you did the previous season? Or you were able to evaluate them more?
I don't know about that. I feel like you obviously didn't have as much like vertical transition time as you had in years past. And I felt like a lot of the shows this year really kind of led really well from like maybe like side 2 battery feature over through the front ensemble, then over to like side 1 battery feature. And I don't know, it just felt like the shows had a really good flow to them in terms of being able to always grab onto something instead of having any transitional time.
Yeah. I mean, Evan and I have talked. It seems like front ensembles definitely got more attention this season. Is that a fair statement, you think?
I would say so. You know, it's all just because you weren't hindered by having to go front to back at all. You know, you were always in a position where you were able to get something.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, we've talked about this too before. Like, we just worried about, and we saw a little bit of this from what we watched of all the groups this season, of groups designing, and you said it earlier, like groups designed a little differently this year with that rule in mind. And I feel like certain cores, in the way they wrote their battery book, knew from the get-go, like, hey, we don't really need to do anything crazy for this section because we're going to be behind the back hash, behind the horn line, and playing under them. No one's ever going to evaluate it. So I noticed segments of certain groups, like the Cavaliers, I'll name, and a couple others, maybe right a little under for certain moments where they weren't exposed. Because they threw Evan and I both for a loop all season. We thought they were bad, then we thought they were good, then we thought they were bad. And it just depended on what chunk of the show we saw. So I don't know. Did you know? I mean, obviously you weren't able to be out on the back hash, but that's just something we were worried about ahead of time, and or before the season, rather.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that, like, in the moment you're not really going to be able to catch on to because, like you said, the placement on the field creates a challenge there. But you know, that's all for those individual cores teaching philosophies and what they want to do. And, you know, everyone's going to have a little bit of a different approach. And, you know, some folks are going to want to go after it, you know, from 0:00 to 11:30.
Yeah. And
some groups are going to, you know, maybe want to take a little bit of a breather in there. So, you know, everyone's going to design the way that they want to for their product.
Yep.
So new question, and not to... This won't be in any direction like, oh, this judge prefers this, so people should do this. But would you say that maybe more non-traditional pit setups? Because I feel like I saw a lot more of that this year, as opposed to like, oh, the front ensembles all the way parallel, flat to the sideline. More people were like angled out on the field. Maybe their pit was scattered on the field. Maybe they were a little bit further back. Would you say that some of that stuff seemed more prevalent to you because of this, allowing more full percussion ensemble reads to where you could read the pit at an angle on side 1 with the battery beside them without having to try to be behind the pit? Do you think that stuff was more prevalent this summer, just to help get full percussive reads without having to stand behind the marimbas?
Yeah, I think a lot of groups did that for a multitude of reasons, that definitely being one of them, but also just to kind of clear that center of the stage off and really allow them to feature whatever they want to. You know, there are a bunch of different groups that kind of tried different setups, and you know, I'll be really intrigued this year to see if groups continue to go down that trend. You know, we kind of saw that in WGI the past couple years, maybe not the past couple years, but a couple years before that, where a lot of groups were like starting to split off the front ensemble. And I think Mystique did that one year where they were like on 45-degree angles on opposite sides of the floor. And you know, people just trying different creative things. You know, sometimes they work better than others. You know, definitely like staging of the battery relative to the front ensemble on an angle can create some challenges from a readability standpoint. But yeah, I think it opens a lot more like creativity and challenges, certainly from an environmental standpoint, trying to bring, you know, the battery coming from behind the front ensemble to all of a sudden in the same phrase in front of the pit, and that trade-off of where tempo is coming from, and you know, manipulation of listening environments, like that stuff is pretty crazy. And like the detail that these groups are getting to with regard to those sorts of skill sets, and then even some groups having props out there where they explore the Z-axis, it's like it's so crazy. Like I didn't age out that long ago, and we didn't even dream of doing anything like that.
Oh man, the activity has evolved so much in the past 5-6 years. It's insane. To even go back to like Tilt at Blue Coats. Tilt was 2014, right?
Yeah.
Like, you to watch that show and then compare it to most shows now, even 5 years later, it's nuts.
Well, and just the introduction of more technology, which allows people to do crazier and crazier things with the in-ear monitors and just the listening environments, like Mike was talking about just a second ago, where the trumpets are on the back hash of side 2, playing the same rhythm that the snares are playing on the front sideline of side 1. You're just like, the ensemble demand is through the roof. I watch shows and I'm perplexed. I'm like, how this must be an ensemble nightmare for whoever's running tempo from the box, like trying to match this up. Like, all right, this section's got to be on top of the hands, and you guys need to feel like you're right on the hands, and like, it's crazy.
Yeah, like how many days in spring training did they go through that, and the staff's just like, is this ever gonna hit? And then it finally does, and they're just like on cloud 9.
Can you guys do that again? We don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, we don't know what you did
whatever that
differently.
was.
Just do it again.
That's awesome. So obviously, you get a front row seat. So I'm kind of going to take this. You have the best vantage point in the house when you're on the field, standing 10 feet away from a battery who's just on their last 2 or 3 shows of the year. They're giving it up. What's that vibe like? Like, what's that reward like when you're sitting there trying to critique those kids, but you're just also somewhat in awe of like what they're giving back to you?
Man, there is nothing like it on earth. And I mean that so sincerely. Like, I've never had another visceral experience like that in my entire life. And like, especially when a group is really just throwing it down and like they know how good it is. And like, there's just so much energy coming off of that it makes, some of those like 16, 17 hour days out there feel like it goes by pretty quickly. So I mean, it's really, really cool. And it's also cool at other times to see groups that, maybe not so much towards the end of the year, but earlier in the season when, things maybe don't go so well in the beginning of the show. And, you get to hear those little moments where it's like they're trying to hype each other up to like, let's go, let's get back in, let's nail this next lick. And then they do. And then the performance just takes off from there. And it's just like being a part of those small little moments is just something that's really, really cool. One moment that like really stuck with me, I can't remember what show it was. It was inside a dome, so it might have been Atlanta in 2017. It was either the moment stuck with me, but I'm forgetting which corps it was. I think it may have been Spirit, but I started out on the field with them and just kind of waiting out there for the announcement and everything to get going. And I think it was their center snare just looked at me and was like, "Hey, Mike, you ready?" And just like for someone to say that, I was just like, oh my God, like, yes, I'm ready. Let's do this thing. And then they came out and played this little triplet roll at like on the edge of the drum, and it was just money. And I was like, all right, you boys came to play tonight.
Dude, that's awesome. I think that's one of the things that I just absolutely love about the Judges tapes. On our 2009 finals tape, JJ was on the field, and we started the show behind the back sideline, like in the end zone. And we had this pod that came up, and we're just running. It was like a 194. But he was back there with us, and he started the tape early, and you could just hear the center snare, Sharif. He's just like yelling at everybody. He's like, I love you guys. I love you guys so much. And then all of a sudden it's 1, 2, 3, dot, 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 and we're in it. It's just like a robot. But that just kind of candid moment right before it, I go back and listen to that, and I'm just like, man, like it takes me back, and I'm just in the moment instantly, and I can remember what it looked like to sit there or stand there on the field and look up at all these thousands of people. And then all of a sudden it was just a click of a hat, and it's like, all right, game time, and we're in it. It's just wild.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so many cool little things that just like happen in a moment in time. And it's like, that's, they're doing these little vocals or like visuals or stuff like that. And it's like, it's totally for them, but just like the fact that I got to experience it with them for that show is just really, really cool.
Yep. That tape, for me, the tapes, my finals tapes are my memories. Like every time, like Evan just said, every time you listen to one of them, it just takes you right back to the moment, whether it's 10 years later, whether it's the summer right after. It doesn't matter. That's what does it for you, man. Like, those tapes are the best part of my summers, I think.
Yeah.
So to word vomit, to try and compare, like, maybe, so you have experience with DCI and local circuits and indoor circuits. What sort of things separate maybe circuit to circuit, or what sort of things do you see that people do well and that people do maybe not as well that they can improve on for, like, maybe a low circuit? That's kind of a hot topic around the Kentucky, at least.
Are you talking about in terms of like how the shows are operated, or like how the judges work, or
maybe anything from judges training to show operation to how the sheets are laid out? And that may be a little bit more of a deeper conversation because everybody has their own sheets with things that they value over one thing or another. But maybe just in terms of training, start there.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, each circuit, whether it's BOA or this coming season, I guess I'll find out about WGI because that's a new thing for me. So I'm pretty psyched about that.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So that's a lot of fun. That's a new thing as of like 2 weeks ago. So pretty psyched to be a part of that team now. But comparing like BOA to DCI to WGI, they're all like totally different beasts in terms of what, you're looking at from a criteria standpoint. From a training standpoint, they're a little bit different as well. Like, DCI and BOA really expect the judges to come in and already have the training and already have the knowledge and the experience to come in and judge at a high level. WGI, from what I understand, because like I said, I haven't gone through it just yet, does a little bit more like hands-on on a week-to-week, like conference calls and things like that. But at the local circuit level, I'm the percussion and winds coordinator for the CWE circuit in the Carolinas, as well as SCGC here in Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, and Northern Alabama. And we've been trying to get more people interested in judging. And the past couple of years, I've run just like a judge training and mentorship program with people in the area that want to get involved and learn a little bit more about it, whether it be people that want to actually like pursue judging or people that are staff members at high schools that want to learn just more about things from a judge's perspective. And I'd really recommend any circuits to run a program like that. If they don't have a coordinator or something like that, get in touch. If they can get in touch with me, or I can get them in touch with someone that's local, and they can try to jump it off from there, because cultivating as much local talent is only going to benefit the group, because when groups get better feedback, then everyone gets better, and a rising tide raises all ships. So that's really something that I think a lot of circuits have started to do, just in terms of having those training programs, and those can be pretty hands-on. So for my guys, we'll have a meeting usually like in December, and that'll just be like going over the sheets and like doing changes from the last year's PAB meeting. And then it'll be getting into like really diving into the sheets. And if it's visual people, I'll usually have someone else that's on the WGI panel come in and work with those folks, just because visual is not really my area of emphasis. But we'll get them through that, get them familiar with what's going on. And then once the shows start, they'll just come to as many shows as they can, run tapes, go to critique, do everything like a normal judge would, and then just kind of track the progress as the season goes on.
Awesome. I know last year you extended the branch out to me. It's like, hey, you heard our podcast and listened to it. And obviously Fantini and I have been, I don't want to say, we've been critical of some things where we have opinions, which is basically what this podcast is about, of what maybe we thought would happen. And we're like, hey, we don't understand how these judges saw this. But obviously we're not on the field. We're watching videos or watching in the parking lot. But then you extended the branch out to me like, hey, you should come trial judge SCGC. and it just didn't work out. But I think that is great, because I would love to do something like that, and hopefully we can make it work this year if the opportunity is still available. Just to, like, obviously for me to put my money where my mouth is, because I talk about judging a lot, but also just to get better as a judge myself, because I do judge it locally and that sort of thing. And I think that it's so important to empower people and encourage people to go do things like that, because there does need to be a new wave of judging, just because the people who have been doing it for years and years can't always and won't always be there. So we need to have qualified, intelligent and informed people there that are trained and ready to go when the time comes, because you, and just to name another guy that I know that's newer, Jeff Brooks, like, those people can't judge every show. So there needs to be like a new wave of judging that's ready to go, that can give detailed and qualified feedback like right away.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally right. And, there's a lot of great judges out there, man. Like, even people that, haven't had the fortune to do, championships week assignments and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of incredible judges out there, and, they all got started with it because, someone either gave them a shot, or, they decided themselves that they were going to pursue it and, try to just see how far they could take it. And, I've been so lucky. Like, I mean, I'm only 32, man. Like, I'm super young. I work in business operations for a government agency. Like, I don't have what you'd maybe expect to be the typical judge background. I don't have a doctorate in percussion performance. I don't teach at a college or anything like that. But, what I try to do is just be as prepared as I possibly can to know the shows like the back of my hand, and to get out there and give the kids every single thing that I've got. And, I think there's a lot of good guys out there, like Jeff Brooks is exactly one of those guys that, he's done a really, really good job since he's gotten started the past few years. And he's been doing it for a long time, even before just starting with DCI. He's kind of like me, got started on the indoor side first. But, there's going to be a lot of good people that are coming up. And, even the people that we have, Alan Christensen, Jeff Brosbury, Mike Davis, Chris Romanowski, Giff Howarth, those guys are no slouches by any means.
Yeah, when JJ's son ages out, he can get back out there too.
Well,
JJ's one of them, man.
I want to jump in with a question that kind of piggybacks onto what we were just talking about, of like somebody like me. I've mentioned I judged my first show last season, and I'd imagine that there's probably others out there that have kind of dipped their toes into the water. And my hesitation of really jumping in the pool is, and it's probably been evident to anyone that listens to this podcast, I'm kind of, I don't want to use the word clueless, but not as educated as I feel like I would need to be to effectively evaluate a front ensemble in like a WGI setting or a DCI setting. Or I can tell if rhythms are being played together, dynamics are being played together, tempo, all that stuff, but I just feel like I miss a lot of nuance. So is it still possible for somebody who only has one side of the coin in their toolbox, like whether it's just battery knowledge or just front knowledge, to really get into it? And like, what advice would you have for me or anybody else in that scenario?
Yeah, so I would advise you just to, try to learn as much as you can about mallet playing. And, I think there's a lot more crossover between the sections than, one might anticipate on the surface level. I mean, the criteria remains consistent between the battery and the front ensemble. So you're still looking at, consistency of expressive qualities, phrasing and shaping, unity of rhythms, all of that stuff remains the same. And then, when you're looking at the difficulty of the parts, that just kind of comes with a little bit of experience and understanding. Some of these runs, octatonic runs, might look a little bit harder than some others, but maybe they're not really that much harder. Just kind of the hand placement makes it look a little bit more challenging. So, you'll just start to get those things by getting a little bit more experience. And man, I got confidence that you could figure it out for sure.
All right. So kind of just jump in the pool then is the best advice.
Definitely.
I feel like that's good advice in a lot of things. Just if you're nervous about doing something and you want to get better at something, just start doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is completely off topic, but I like to grill. And I was watching a guy who's smoking brisket the other day. He's been doing it for like 8 years. He's like, the only way to get good at smoking brisket is to fail at smoking brisket. And so I feel like that's kind of a similar trait. Like, the only way that you can get good at drumming is to fail a lot of drumming. The only way you can get good at judging is to fail a lot of judging. I mean, I always tell my kids that I teach at high school that reps cure all. Like, you just got to get more reps. Like, I can't even evaluate you until I think that you actually know what you're doing and give you feedback. So
it's amazing how that concept applies to so many different things throughout life.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. But and I'll still go back and I listen to every single tape that I do. Usually, like the day following the show, like if it's a travel day or something like that, I'll usually listen to all my tapes on the plane and take notes on them and about what I thought was good, or if I said a certain word a whole bunch that I just for whatever reason that was like my word of the day, try to get that out of the vocabulary a little bit. But it's just all about you guys are pretty analytical guys. It's just doing the analysis and trying to think about from your perspective, like what is a perfect recording, and then trying to do that essentially.
All right.
That's a tough question to ask. What's the perfect recording? Because I feel like that question too varies over what part of the season it is. I mean, obviously, finals week. Obviously, during finals week, you guys aren't done judging. That's when you're probably the most hypercritical. But at the same time, there's a lot of tapes out there from finals week where people are just. I'm just soaking this in. Like, all right, I'm just listening. Like, I've heard the plenty of times that Jeff Prosser, you guys gave me goosebumps or that sort of thing. But I'm sure that perfect tape varies over the course of the season, early season, whatever it is, DCI, BOA, local circuit. That early season tape is like big picture. I see what you guys are trying to do. Maybe this design-wise, from a pacing standpoint. Mid-season, it's maybe think about changing this. Do we need this? Is this the most effective? Is this the most clarity we're going to get by the end of the year? Then at the very end of the season, it's just, was it in there or was it not? And how good was it? I mean, that's kind of maybe the way I'm thinking out loud right now, but those tapes, I'm sure, change as over the course of the summer.
Big time. I mean, I the last 2 years I've done the tour premiere, and then I've gone on to championships. So I've gotten to see everyone from the very first to the very end. And it's kind of like making a statue, where it's like you start with like a block of granite and you're going to take away big chips at the beginning, and it starts to like create its form, and then by the end it's just like little minor details that you're picking up on. So I mean, and like the way that the commentary is shaped is a little bit different as well, because in the beginning, like, man, they know the ticks are out there, like they know it, they don't need you to say that the entire recording. So it's a lot of just kind of like taking in the program and learning more about what they're doing, because they know what's going on out there. And then, that becomes a little bit more critical as the season goes on.
And I find that as much valuable as anything as judging on a local circuit or whether you're doing anything, is that early season, the groups that tick the most might not always be the worst groups, especially early on, because maybe they're doing more content, maybe they have more demand, maybe this, maybe that, maybe that. So there's so much nuance and levels of the activity you have to take into account from a judging perspective, which is why, especially this season, above a lot that I've seen recently, and Fantini and I have talked about this ourselves, we're just watching and we're like, man, we do not envy the judges at all, because the decision making and the calls were so close. We watched a lot of groups, and maybe the top 4 groups this year could have been the best group on any other given year for the last 5 years. It was a really, really fun year to watch DCI percussion.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was one of those years where it was like, on any given night, you never knew who was going to show up and who was going to bring it. And and how it was going to all shake out. I don't know. I don't think I've looked at all the recaps from the finals week shows, but I would say there's probably a pretty good amount of variance in there from night to night, just because of how good everyone was and how close it really was.
Yeah, it was definitely a splitting hairs season for sure.
Yeah, it's super fun to be a part of that, because, like we were talking about before, just like that visceral reaction where like those guys know that they're just throwing it down out there. Like, it was super cool to get that from like 7 or 8 or 9 groups this year.
Yep.
Whew.
Did not envy you guys.
Yeah.
Was that a sneeze?
No, I was just like saying like, oh man, like,
oh, okay.
that's a tough one. That's tough.
Yeah.
And then to sit in front of those people. Of course,
Exactly.
I guess they stopped critique like at some point in the season now in DCI, but still, there. And Mike and I, or Fantini and I, have talked about this before many times. Just people who think like, oh, maybe this group should have been higher than they were, but then you think in your head, well, above who? Because that group above them was also really good, and then this group was really good. So it's like, oh man, like what a tough gig, but also very rewarding to experience those ensembles from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's the best job in the world. Like, I mean, and that's regardless of like the particular activity like DCI, WGI, or BOA or fall band. Like, to be out there and like I feel really lucky to be a part of it, and it's so cool to see just what these kids can do. Like, it's just insane. Even high school kids, like it's crazy the books that these kids are given and the way that they're able to achieve it by the end. Like, you look at what Chino Hills and some of those groups are doing, it's crazy.
Oh yeah, obviously you'll get, I guess, a more dabble in the WGI this year, but watching some of these WGI World Class Classic groups, I'm just like, dude, what is going on right now?
Yeah,
Arcade.
Dude, I mean, you take some of them and you can plug some of them right into PIW. I mean, it's crazy.
Dude, we've talked about that.
I'm pretty sure. Where's Mapes at?
John Mapes, yeah.
Where's he at? What school? I can't think.
Chino Hills,
God.
yeah.
He's Chino. Shut up. It's been a long day. They would easily. I think we said this last season that Chino Hills would easily make finals in Independent World, like easily, if not beat a handful of groups, if not a lot of groups.
They're definitely cleaner than a lot.
Oh yeah,
but whatever.
I mean, those kids are ridiculous. Like, whatever they've got in the water and like that Arcadia, Chino Hills area, because all those schools, like them and Ayala, are all like, I think they're only like 15 minutes apart from each other.
Yeah, they're all in the same city.
Yeah. And 15 minutes in California driving has got to be like half a mile away.
Yeah, for us sitting in traffic.
Oh
man, dude, they're not very far, and they got the system figured out. They have the community support, the school structure. Like they got it going. And there's obviously many other great groups. There's that one from Texas that I love, Burleson, that Luke Willingham's at. Shout out, Luke.
They were so good last year. Oh my goodness.
And then obviously you have Dartmouth and the Etowanda from California. I mean, dude, the high school thing drives me, like, it blows my mind. It's crazy, but
it's almost more impressive to me to watch a really, really good high school group than one of the top drum corps groups.
I like them both personally.
Oh, they're both awesome. I mean, they're both awesome, but it's almost more impressive to me when a high school group achieves that level of clarity.
Well, I guess we're getting close to the end here, but real quick. So 2016, Mike Leitzke gets his email or text or phone call or whatever you get. You're on the field, 2016 finals night. What's your immediate thought process?
What? I could not believe it. So, like, the way that we find out what show we're getting, you'll usually get like an email or something throughout the season at some point, just saying you're going to come in and you're going to do championships. But you don't actually find out what show you're doing until the Wednesday before prelims. So, like, and we do a little dinner thing that happens, and it's usually towards the end they reveal the panels. And it's so funny, that year they gave us these cards, and there was a time that was written on the back of the card, kind of in a spot where you wouldn't necessarily look at. And I had done open class finals that year as well. I did open class in 15, open class prelims, and 16 I did open class finals. So I thought, because I had seen the open class teams, I was probably going to do prelims because it was my first time going in for world class championships. And when they said it was a time that corresponded with your call time, I looked at mine, I think it said 5:30. And I was just like, oh man, I knew it was a long day, but I didn't know it was that long. And
Are you thinking 5:30 a.m.?
Yes, 5:30 a.m. So then, John is like, okay, so if you see 8 a.m., then you have prelims. And I was kind of like, okay, 5:30 doesn't really make sense for semifinals. Then he was like, if you see 12:30, you have semifinals. And if you see 5:30, you have finals night, Saturday night. And my jaw had to have been on the floor for at least 10 to 15 minutes. Where it's just like, I could not believe it. And I can't even imagine what John Phillips and Jay Kennedy's cell phones looked like later that night when the panels went out. But I mean, I'm forever grateful for their trust for that. And to be able to do that show with the likes of, Alan Christensen and Jeff Prosperi and JJ and, all these like legendary figures in the judging community. It was ridiculous. It was like definitely one of those, like, I don't feel like I belong here moments, but it was so cool.
Out of body experience.
Oh,
yeah.
And let me tell you, when that show started, the Boston Crusaders were the 12th place corps that year. From the second they stepped off to the Blue Coats ending was like a blink of an eye. Like, it went by so quickly.
That's awesome.
That's great. Well,
and it's kind of funny too, because you make that reference like it went by in the blink of an eye, but then other people who from an armchair will critique it for hours on end. It's just so ridiculous, the dichotomy of that situation.
Yeah.
Hey, and you know what, man? We need those fans. Without fans, we don't have an activity. So
this is
bring
true.
it on.
This is very true. Well, we've been going for about an hour and 8 minutes now. I think that's a good note to end this on. You got anything else, Evan? Or Mike? Anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, so in case anybody is listening to this and is interested in getting involved with judging or wants to know a little bit more about next steps to maybe talk about getting involved with judging, feel free to find me on Facebook or Instagram and send me a DM, and I'd be happy to get you either set up with myself or with someone else that can get you going.
Cool.
And that's Mike, Leitkze, right?
Tzke.
Tzke. Well, I'm dyslexic.
The spelling will be in the podcast link. It'll be in the title.
not really not the easiest last name in the world.
It's all good.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging out, everybody, sticking around this long with us today. Again, just a reminder, subscribe on YouTube, like the video, subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, follow on Facebook and Instagram. All that helps us. And I think we'll be back in a few weeks with another guest episode, hopefully, and we'll reveal that at the time. So we'll see everybody then.
Peace.